Hi there, this is the Athletic Football Podcast. As the December football comes thick and fast, it's match day 16. Hi there everyone, I'm Adam Leventhal, welcoming in our third match day out of 7 this month. We have barely got our breath back after that midweek set of Premier League games which saw 30 goals, and now we go again. Let's introduce our cast for today. It is a two-man team. First of all, hello to Ollie K. You have had a busy week, have you not?
I'm busy every week, but yes, I guess you're referring to the sort of video marathon or TV marathon on Wednesday night, where I was under orders to watch all the games at once, which meant having six screens open, and it did my head in basically. It fried my head trying to watch. You know when you see people doing it, trying to watch 2 or 3 matches at once, you can't. The only way to watch a match properly is to just immerse yourself in that one match. So I found it a profoundly unsatisfactory viewing experience, but it allowed me to get some things off my chest about football on TV. So that piece is on The Athletic.
Excellent. So you've sort of recovered a little bit. That's good to hear. Alongside Ollie is Joey Durso, who is not only fantastic at investigations, but perhaps more importantly, he's an Aston Villa fan. So he's literally walking on cloud 9 at the moment. How are you, Joey?
Very well, yeah. Still slightly coming down from the high of that battering of Pep Guardiola's Man City. And I'll be there on Saturday at Villa Park to see if they can do the same against Arsenal.
Yeah. Oh, it's going to be a great game. We'll get stuck into that and the weekend's action. Just a quick mention before we kick on with our fixture formation. A new addition to your weekend preview enjoyment. You can now watch every episode in full on the Athletic Football Podcast YouTube channel. We're normally in the studio, just in case you were wondering, but we are today at our respective homes because this schedule has really messed with all our logistics, but we will be back in the studio next week. Right, let's get into the fixture formation for this weekend. It is a very simple 6-4 setup over Saturday and Sunday. These are the games. The Saturday early kickoff is Crystal Palace with Roy Hodgson under quite a lot of pressure, 5 defeats out of 7 up against Liverpool, who will go top with a win. That's the 12:30. 4 Saturday 3 o'clocks. Wolves against Nottingham Forest. Steve Cooper, like Roy Hodgson, is under pressure as well. You also have Brighton against Burnley. Sheffield United, that's Chris Wilder's second game in charge, against Brentford. And then Manchester United against Bournemouth. And then, as we mentioned before, Saturday evening, 3rd against 1st. It is Aston Villa against Arsenal at 5:30. Then on Sunday, 3 2 o'clocks. You've got Luton against Manchester City. No win in 4 for them. Fulham against West Ham. Both sides on a high after their results in midweek. Fulham 5-0 battering of Nottingham Forest, and then West Ham winning at Spurs. And then you have Everton now out of the relegation zone against Chelsea. And then on Sunday afternoon, you have Spurs against Newcastle. Both sides licking their wounds. Let's start the show, though, at red hot Villa Park. So Aston Villa welcome Arsenal in Saturday's late kickoff. Aston Villa with that dominant victory over the champions Manchester City 1-0. Meanwhile, Arsenal, they are 2 points clear at the top of the table going into this weekend after that dramatic late 4-3 win at Luton. Joey, just sum up the feelings of being an Aston Villa fan at the moment in comparison with previous seasons, because now people are expecting things from Aston Villa. People are talking about not only the Champions League, but people are maybe quietly saying, well, hang on a minute, if they can beat Manchester City, what are they capable of? Could they go all the way? Are we getting ahead of ourselves?
Yeah, I think we are. And I think, all the Villa fans I know would certainly chuck a bucket of cold water on that. They drew at Bournemouth last week. They lost against Nottingham Forest a few weeks ago. I think no one's getting that far ahead. But, Champions League seems like a real prospect. And I think, for the first few weeks or months of Emery, it was, is this a fluke? Is this Are they outpacing XG? But now, over the course of a calendar year, Villa have been the third or fourth best team in the league. And there are so many players in that team that are just, playing like they're one of the best teams in the league. You've got, John McGinn absolutely running the show against Man City the other night. I think it's going to get harder as the season goes on. Villa don't have the squad depth that the teams around them maybe do. It's going to get really hard in the Europa Conference League. I didn't quite realise until having a look at the fixture list that how compressed those games are. Between the round of 16 and the final is about 2.5 months, 7 games. So if that is also going on with a Champions League race, it'll be really tough. So I think people are realistic, but also just so excited. I mean, Villa, obviously a massive team, won the European Cup in 82, couple of League Cups in 94, 96, which I'm just too young to remember. And ever since then, it's been pretty boring. Promotion from the Championship, but shouldn't have been there anyway. This is the glory days. This is the dream. It's amazing. It's great. Can't wait to get down there on Saturday and hopefully beat Arsenal.
Ollie, from your perspective and from what you were able to gather from that victory over Manchester City, how good were Villa? Because the statistics were so far one way in favour of Villa. It was quite remarkable, wasn't it?
Yeah, I thought they were outstanding. I tweeted during the game, or X'd, do we have to say that now, that it was the best performance I'd seen in the Premier League this season. Someone said, "Oh, stop exaggerating." I mean, it really clearly was. What has been a better performance in the Premier League this season? I mean, if I think of Liverpool's best, it was probably against Villa at Anfield, a fairly comfortable 3-0. If I think of Man City's best, it was probably that derby win at Manchester United a few weeks ago, but that wasn't them at absolute top level, 10 out of 10. This was pretty much a 10 out of 10 performance from Villa. It was so energetic, so committed, so incredibly well structured, organised. The way they defended together, the way they pressed, and the way they attacked so incisively. I mean, I know you could say they got Man City at a good time because of a couple of injuries and obviously the suspension of Rodri, which is very important. But I thought they were so good, so good. It was. I've been impressed with them all season, but that was not only a level above anything else I'd seen from them this season, but a level above anything else I'd seen from anyone this season. Which is not to say that they're the best team in the league, but that was just such an outstanding performance.
And Joey, just to explain for people who aren't necessarily familiar with going to Villa Park or having studied that recent run, the fact that Villa are now going for their 15th straight home win, why are they so dominant and dependable at Villa Park at the moment?
Yeah, well, I think the atmosphere's been great, as it would be at any ground where a team have won so many games. But I think it's a ground that's seen a lot of misery in the past 20 years. It's often been pretty dull, pretty uninspiring stuff. So people are just so up for it. And the performances have just been, very dominant, against I think there was a stat that Villa were behind against Crystal Palace for about 40 minutes and then came back to win 3-1. And that's the only time in those 13 wins that Villa have been behind. So it's just really kind of swatting teams away, really dominant. That midfield of Luiz, Kamara, McGinn, I think is up there with the best midfields in the league. Really solid at the back. Ollie Watkins scoring loads of goals. Emi Martinez, who's been declared the best goalkeeper in the world by FIFA. So it's a really good team from strength to back. I mean, it's really not the same away from home. But when Villa Park is bouncing, I think as more and more grounds kind of modernise and become these modern stadiums, which can often seem quite similar, it's that traditional four-sided English ground can just feel really special and really unique. And they're upgrading it. The transport around the ground is terrible, which is a whole different topic. But I think it feels like a really special place, maybe more so than it did 20 years ago, because it's almost different in being traditional.
Ollie, having seen Villa so full of energy and pressing at every opportunity against Manchester City, how important do you think this week is in terms of having played a day later than Arsenal? Yes, obviously Arsenal were involved in a thriller at Kenilworth Road, but we've heard Jurgen Klopp get quite prickly this week when he was speaking on Amazon about the schedule. Obviously, this week it really intensifies. So potentially that extra 24 hours for Arsenal could potentially make the difference.
Yeah, managers will always say they could do with all the extra rest that they can get. Maybe playing Wednesday rather than Tuesday enabled Villa to produce a performance of that level on Wednesday, having had an extra 24 hours since their weekend game. But I think the way Villa are playing at the moment, they seem like they're on the crest of a wave, and they look like they'd be ready to. They looked on Wednesday like they'd be ready to play again on Thursday. Doesn't quite work like that physiologically, does it? But it's. I think when teams are in that frame of mind and in that sort of physical condition, that they can just welcome the next game whenever it comes. But obviously there are limits to how far to how far players can run over a short period of time, and that was an extremely energetic and no doubt emotionally energetic performance as well. So it was there might be a knock-on effect, but I don't see Emery being the type of manager who would labour that point.
A couple of Arsenal subplots that are definitely worth mentioning ahead of the game. The Raya Ramsdale issue is still very much a live issue. However much Mikel Arteta poo-poos it at every opportunity and saying that, I'm very happy with my team, he doesn't even engage in it. Do you think that this may develop into an Achilles heel for him, Ollie? Or do you think that what Raya is maybe bringing, aside from some mistakes, is actually more important for Arsenal?
I'm really quite torn on it. I understood the idea in the summer. I thought Ramsdale had a good season, but was probably one of the positions where you thought, well, if you were going to upgrade anywhere, maybe you could get a really, really top class keeper. And I understood the logic of that, as harsh as it seems, as ruthless as it seems. I'm just not convinced that Raya is that big an upgrade, or that as much as we talk about Raya's ability with the ball, which he's got a beautiful ping on him the same way Edison has, for example. I don't think he looks that much different to Ramsdale in terms of the playing it out in tight spaces under pressure, as in short passing. I feel like it's a problem for them at the moment. They've not kept many clean sheets this season. They've been, when Ramsdale came back in, he made mistakes. It doesn't feel like either goalkeeper is feeling incredibly confident at the moment. It doesn't feel like the defence are that confident in either goalkeeper. It's an awkward one. I can understand the reasons for wanting to sort of challenge the unquestioned supremacy of Ramsdale last season and bring in somebody who they felt could challenge and overtake him, but I don't feel like at the moment it's working. And yet they're top of the table. So, and I think they've won the last 6 in all competitions and 8 out of the last 10. So,
yes,
it's first world problems, I guess. I mean, it's very different to the kind of nitpicking we were doing with Arsenal 2 or 3 years ago when we were saying he's not good enough, he's not fit, he doesn't care, he's earning too much. Some of those apply to the same player. So it's a relatively an issue, but Arsenal are doing pretty well as things stand.
Yeah, and they will argue, yes, there might have been a few high-profile mistakes or hiccups, but they have the joint best defence in the Premier League with only 14 goals conceded. Joey, just a quick word on the fact that it's almost a shame, really, that we're not going to see Unai Emery and all his gesticulating and running up and down in the technical area and be able to compare it right alongside Mikel Arteta, because Arteta isn't going to be on the touchline. That's potentially going to have an impact, do you think, on Arsenal's energy on the day, or not really?
Yeah, I mean, he's certainly a very active man on the touchline, isn't he, Arteta? I'll be interested to see, has anyone run the numbers on whether it has an effect on the pitch? You know, maybe you could say it helps because if you make a mistake, you're not looking nervously over to the guy shouting at you. You know, who knows? But yeah, Unai Emery certainly loves gesticulating on the sideline, and I'm sure wherever Arteta is, he'll be gesticulating. It's been interesting seeing the shift in expectations with Arsenal this season. I mean, they're not doing that. They're doing basically the same as they were last season, and maybe they're 3 points worse off or something. But they're top of the table. They're playing really well, and they're winning these games like the Luton game, the Man United game, and their fans just seemed a bit pretty nervous, pretty twitchy, I guess, because how it all went wrong in a few weeks in April last season. But think these are great times to be an Arsenal fan. They're doing really well, and they're top of the league.
Just a quick mention, because I didn't mention it earlier on, that if you are an Arsenal fan, you're not going to want to miss the Athletic Football Podcast episode, which dropped on Monday. And it referenced, actually, the last time that Arsenal won at Villa Park, the last team to win at Villa Park, and Jorginho, who scored what turned out to be the winner, although it did rebound off Emi Martinez, etc., etc. He is the main guest on that podcast, and it's a fascinating chat with Io, so you can check that one out. Let's get some predictions on Villa against Arsenal. Let's start with you, Joey. You're going to be there.
God, I've got to predict to win, haven't I? 2-1 Villa.
2-1 Villa, and
15
Ollie.
in a row. Yeah.
I will go 2-2 and one of the games of the season.
Fantastic. Well, let's hope it is. Next up for us, what is happening at Manchester City? So 4 games without a win for Manchester City after that 1-0 loss at Aston Villa, and it's their longest run without a league win under Pep Guardiola since early 2017, and he has admitted that they are struggling. They'll be hoping to break that sequence at Kenilworth Road against Luton Town this weekend. But let's just analyse what has been the problem for them recently. Ollie, you mentioned about Rodri early on. He missed the game against Aston Villa. Is it that simple that he's such a key piece of the jigsaw? And if so, how has Pep Guardiola not solved that problem? They haven't won any of the 4 games that he's missed. It's sort of juxtaposed to Pep Guardiola's brilliance, isn't it?
Yeah, well, he signed Calvin Phillips as a sort of Rodri understudy, and that hasn't really worked. But I mean, that's probably seen as a stick with which to beat Calvin Phillips. But I think any player as an understudy for Rodri, I think he's so outstanding, the best in the world, comfortably in that position, one of the best players in the league. I don't think he ever gets mentioned for the individual awards, but I think he should have been right up there for the PFA award last season, for the Ballon d'Or. He should be sort of top 3, top 4 for that, in my opinion. He's so good. And there's a massive drop-off when he's not there, and they've got nobody who can replicate that. And they try to play a different way when he's not there, because they don't put Phillips in. They didn't start with Kovacic on Wednesday. It was a completely different type of midfield, and they were completely overrun. And I'm not saying Rodri alone would have turned it from a one-sided game one way to a one-sided game the other way. But I've never seen them overrun like that when Rodri's been playing. So he is that good. He really is. But I think it was that probably was the wrong game at the wrong time. I mean, when he picked up that booking against Tottenham, I think a lot of people were thinking, oh right, well he's going to miss Villa away. It's not like missing. With respect, it's not like missing Luton away. I think that suspension fell at a really awkward time, as did the previous one when he missed the game against Arsenal, didn't he? And they lost that. So they're not the same team without him. But I don't think they've been. People look at the last 4 games and they've taken they've taken 3 points, 3 draws and a defeat. But it's also 3 wins in 9 in the Premier League. I've not heard too many people point that out in terms of the stat. They haven't really I mean, they won the first 6 in the league. So again, we're talking about first world problems. But I don't think they're anything. I don't think their performance level has been anywhere near that of last spring when they were outstanding. On the other hand, I would say their performance level this time last year wasn't great either. They didn't really sort of hit third, fourth, fifth, the top gears until January, and De Bruyne went on that run, and everything seemed to sort of click into place with the team set up, with the hunger of the team, with the attitude of the team, and I could see the same happening again. It's not like they're miles and miles behind. It's more a case, I think, really of whether Arsenal and Liverpool and possibly Villa can set a pace that makes it hard for City to catch up. But I could see them going on looking at how the fixtures changed now, I could see them going on a bit of a run.
Yeah, because that's what they normally do. And it's almost, I don't know, it's almost as if Pep Guardiola likes having a little bit of an extra challenge to get his teeth into. If it was too easy, maybe it wouldn't be as much fun for Pep Guardiola to be able to sort of surge past the other teams and catch them. But Joey, from your point of view, I suppose it's sort of a double barrel question. Do you think that it was almost likely that after the highs of winning the treble that there was going to be some sort of drop off, and at the same time, if you think that this drop off is something different, do you think that maybe Arsenal, this might be Arsenal's season? They're 6 points off them at the moment. Maybe this recent run is saying that maybe it might not be their season.
Yeah, with the drop off, I think you saw similar with Liverpool when they had that season of 60 odd games and they missed out on the Premier League and Champions League, but won the 2 domestic cups, and afterwards they were just completely emotionally, physically drained and had a bad run. And maybe it's similar. It's just most teams don't play 60 something games; they play 40 something games. But yeah, they do seem pretty off. I mean, against Villa, they were just totally not at the races at all. I've never seen, who's beaten City recently? Wolves, Brentford. It follows a formula, right? It's City have 20 shots on target, somehow don't score or score one. The other team, get a corner and score, or get a penalty near the end and score. That's how Man City usually lose in the league. You do not see them being overrun in midfield like that. But we've seen it multiple times before, right? They have a shaky time in the autumn and then in the new year go and run 15 games back to back. I don't see Arsenal or even Liverpool putting on a run like that. But, maybe I'll be wrong.
But Ollie, they're going to beat Luton, aren't they?
I would suspect so. Yeah, it's. I mean, Luton were really impressive on Tuesday night against Arsenal. The way they competed and the way they never give up. They're competitive in every game, and they were written off so widely and so disparagingly at the start of the season. But every game has been a battle for the opposition. Perhaps after the first 2 or 3, where they played Chelsea and played Brighton and they lost quite soundly in those 2 away games. But since then, and particularly at Kenilworth Road, they have been really competitive. And I think they'll make it quite difficult for City. But yeah, I think it's fair to say I would predict a City win, especially with Rodri back and perhaps Grealish back. I don't know quite why they are up to with that, but yeah, I would expect a City win.
I was just looking at their fixtures until the new year, and it's Luton, Palace, Everton, and Sheffield United. So obviously going to Goodison Park is tough at the moment, but you'd expect them to, get at least 3 wins in there. So things might all look a bit different by New Year's Day.
And I think this is happening a lot with the fixture list, where we're seeing these sort of clusters of really hard games for teams. I don't know whether it's deliberate, whether the Premier League do it, but it seems like you can see these tough runs coming a mile off, and obviously you don't expect Man City to take 3 points from 4 games, but there are these clusters of hard games, and then it gets much easier, and it's a strange quirk of the fixture list, but it does feel like those sort of testing periods are things that you can perhaps foretell in some ways, and likewise the the gentler runs that sometimes follow.
Quick predictions from you. Luton, Man City, Joey?
1-1. Why not?
Ooh.
Okay, fine. And Ollie?
Having said all that I've said about Luton, I think this might be one game where they do find it hard. So I'll say 3-0 for Man City.
Okay. Up next, let's head around the rest of the Premier League. So let's have a look at the Sunday 4:30 kickoff in the UK, and that is Tottenham against Newcastle, and both teams coming off bad losses on Thursday night. Spurs lost against West Ham 2-1. Again they led, again they lost, and then Newcastle lost 3-0 at Everton, and they headed away with more injury worries, the likes of Jamal Lascelles hobbling off just to mount Eddie Howe's injury woes. Ollie, let's deal with Spurs. That problem that they've got, where they go ahead and they still lose. Are we seeing fragility in Ange Postecoglou's philosophy here, or is it just a phase they're going through?
I don't think it's particularly fragility in the way they play. I think there's probably some fragility in the team, and particularly again with injuries, they've been quite depleted the last few weeks, particularly defensive midfield. It's not been the same 11 and as was playing so well at the start of the season. They're a team where if you look beyond the sort of first 11 or 12 players, there's quite a drop off in quality. I think, and in terms of the players beyond that, so I think that is a factor. We've still seen them taking the game to the opposition, playing on the front foot where possible. Not possible for long periods at Man City on Sunday, but they still managed to take the lead, still managed to score 3 times. So we've seen that belief in the way they play, and we've seen a vulnerability when they're attacked. And I don't think everything was right with the philosophy and the way they were playing in the first few months of the season, and there was a sense that perhaps the results were slightly better than the performances. A lot of the time, you think back to that Sheffield United win, you think back to the win against Liverpool when Liverpool were down to 9 men. I think those were slightly flattering in different ways in terms of the quality of their performance, but I think there's been a little bit of a regression to the mean, plus the injuries, plus a tougher run of games again. Not that West Ham at home is a game they should have lose from 1-0 up, but yeah, I think various factors tell you why perhaps the honeymoon period is over, but I don't think that means it's suddenly really problematic playing on the front foot. I like the way they play. I like what he's trying to do. And I think when they get the main players back, and maybe if they can add to their team in January, I think everything will be cheery again. I don't see Spurs fans panicking and feeling depressed the way they did 12 months ago whenever a result went wrong under Conte, and 2-3 years ago when they lost games under Mourinho. That there is something you can get behind, I think, with Postecoglou, and I think that's I think that's quite a consolation, really.
Yeah, he's got plenty of credit in the bank, despite the fact that they haven't won in 5 games. Newcastle's form isn't actually that bad. It's just that their injury problems continue. It's a similar situation to Spurs. But also, Joey, they are great at home, but less so away from home. 8 wins at home, only 1 away. And they also have to factor into their thinking a really important game in the following midweek, next week, in the Champions League against AC Milan. They've got a few issues, and this feels like quite a pivotal couple of games for them in their season, doesn't it?
Yeah, particularly against Spurs. I mean, it feels like with Villa, there's a sort of race for Champions League there. The league's already separating into its sort of mini divisions. You've got, Arsenal, Liverpool, Man City in the title race. Then the Champions League, those three teams plus, Man United, even Chelsea aren't too far behind. So it'd be massive. Losing that game would be really bad for both those teams, I think. And Newcastle are so weakened by injuries. I mean, as a Tottenham, and I think it'll be totally different when they get some players back. It's really noticeable this season just how many injuries there are. We've got, the longer injury time, which is good in many respects. We're seeing less time wasting, but we're seeing so many more injuries. And off the back of that, ever since COVID, really, just this relentless schedule. And, players have just been running to the ground. And I don't think it's serving the longer term interests of football at all.
Right, let's move on to one of those other teams in the mix for Champions League places. Manchester United, if they win, they could go level on points with Manchester City. They take on Bournemouth, and United getting a real confidence-boosting victory against Chelsea in midweek. And interesting that Erik ten Hag, who has been prepared to take some bold decisions, did it again with Marcus Rashford. Ollie dropped to the bench, and it reaped rewards. Obviously, Scott McTominay was the hero once again. But how do you assess how Erik ten Hag is dealing with the pressure that he is under at the moment?
To be honest, I feel like a lot of their best performances and results over the last 18 months or so, since he arrived, the start of last season, have been when they've been backs against the wall, and when he's had to make tough decisions, and when he's had to sort of challenge the underperforming players and really urge them to sort of dig deep. And I think back to that Liverpool game at the start of last season, that was a really important one for them. I think in a different way, this game against Chelsea was really important. They really needed a reaction. Their Premier League form was actually really good. They've won, I think, six out of the last 8. There's talk of Harry Maguire being Player of the Month and Ten Hag being Manager of the Month, which will surprise people when they look at United's form in the Champions League. But the Premier League form has actually been pretty good, and in terms of the Rashford decision, I think it was, I think it would be been braver in some ways to stick with him, because he's not been playing well. The difficulty has been, nobody, who do you put in, because Anthony's not been playing well. But he gave Anthony a game on Wednesday night, and Anthony played a lot better. Garnacho's producing more often, I would say, and looking more reliable by the week, probably. So yeah, it was a bold call from a man management point of view, but I think from a tactical point of view, it was probably a fairly straightforward decision, and it was vindicated by probably their best performance of the season.
And Joey, I'm not sure how sort of on top of the situation you are, but I will chance my arm. The fact that Sir Dave Brailsford, Jean-Claude Blanc of Ineos met Manchester United executives at Old Trafford on Thursday. Obviously, they are working with Sir Jim Radcliffe, and his acquisition appears as if it's edging closer. Once it is, that will feel like a bit of a weight is lifted. Yes, obviously the Glazers are still involved, but it might just add a bit of momentum, a bit of clarity heading into January.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this situation's gone on for over a year now. There's obviously the whole thing about the Qataris, which never happened. It must be very destabilising to not know who your boss is for all that time. I think just psychologically that's difficult for the manager, for the team even. I think once that's done, it will feel a bit calmer.
And Ollie, just a quick word on Bournemouth, because everyone's thinking, oh, it's Manchester United against Bournemouth. They'll win again at home. But the turnaround at Bournemouth has been really impressive, and it shows just keeping the faith at times can actually serve you well, can't it?
Yeah, I mean, it was about a month ago. There was talk of Iraola being under quite a lot of pressure, and they lost a number of games on the run. There was a win against Burnley in the middle of that, and then they got hammered 6-1 at Man City, and people were saying, "Oh, well, is that going to be it? Is that going to be it for Iraola?" And I spoke to people at Bournemouth at the time, and they were saying, "Look, we need points on the board, but we're not. This wasn't done in the expectation of clicking from day one. It was, it's an appointment which we think will improve the team going forward. You look at the last 4 games. I think it's 3 wins and a draw, and they're playing really well. And it's I wouldn't say they're favourites at Old Trafford by any means, but they've moved away from the bottom 3, and I could looking at what's coming up the next 3 games after that, they've got Luton, Forest, Fulham. I think they're definitely heading in the right direction, and it's good to see.
Yeah, Bournemouth up to 15th now in the table, 3 wins and a draw in their last 4 games. So faith shown in Iraola. I wonder if the same will be shown in Steve Cooper at Nottingham Forest. They go to Wolves on Saturday. They lost 5-0 against Fulham in midweek. Do we feel like we're at sort of end of days now for Steve Cooper if they were to lose at Wolves, and the hierarchy might have a little bit more time to bring someone else in? It just feels as if it's going to happen probably very soon, or is that being unfair, Ollie?
I think unfair is the fact that that it's probably going to happen. I don't think it's unfair us saying that. I look at the job he's done over the last 2 years. I think it's absolutely outstanding, because I think the club is still essentially a bit of a basket case under this regime, and I think Cooper has produced a sort of or fostered a sense of stability, serenity on the pitch on match days, which is so admirable. But I think he's always been on borrowed time, because I think Marinakis is one of these owners who always wants to be trying to make a difference, and always wanting to sign sort of 7, 8, 9, 10, 12, 15 players in the transfer window, always wanting to change the manager. That's his instinct. You look at the way he runs Olympiacos, you look at what he did at Forest before appointing Cooper, you look at what he's done. I think every instinct will be that, no, I'm sorry, we change manager now. And I think it's unfair, and I think it's the wrong decision, personally. But I looked at Steve Cooper on Wednesday night, and he looks fairly wearied. He looks a little bit broken and jaded by that performance. And I think a lot of that, I think 2 years working under Marinakis at Forest must be quite wearying in itself, and I feel like it's probably coming to an end. But I think that's a cause for regret for Forest fans, rather than the celebration you sometimes see when managers are sacked.
Yeah, and Joey, just a quick word. It looks, with another link to the game, as if Julian Lopetegui, the former Wolves boss, who left under a cloud just as the season was about to kick off and replaced by Gary O'Neill, might be the guy to go in at Forest. Do you see that being a match made in heaven if it does happen?
Yeah, I mean, it kind of makes sense, doesn't it? There's also, is it Glasner, has been mentioned. But it just seems there's such instability at Forest, the constant changing of personnel, the constant changing of players. I mean, with Steve Cooper, I was actually chatting to a friend who's a Forest fan the other day. There are huge parallels with Dean Smith at Aston Villa, who, complete hero, got the team promoted, did really well, and then things went sour. And there was a real feeling with Villa, and I think there is with Forest, that no one wants things to get so bad that, the crowd sort of turn on him or anything like that, because the memories are so brilliant. I think the difference is that there isn't the trust in the hierarchy at Forest to necessarily get the next decision right. Some of those players that have been signed for a lot of money really don't look very good, and the sort of core team that got them promoted, I know they've had some bad injuries as well, but I don't think getting a sort of newer, shinier manager who's won things in Europe is necessarily going to have the solution that Marinakis wants it to. But that squad is packed with brilliant players, and they should be, in mid-table and far from any relegation fears.
just a quick word before we go. One of the other games that I wanted to mention, Everton against Chelsea, Sunday at 2:00. And it's interesting, now Everton, they got their victory against Newcastle, they're out of the relegation zone. If they hadn't have been deducted those 10 points, they would be above Chelsea in 10th in the Premier League. And they take on Chelsea at Goodison Park. And Ollie, the way that it's going at the moment, it almost feels that even with these 10 points taken off, they may well still make it into the top half of the table. They're going along like a train at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, look, top half looks daunting with that 10-point deduction. I mean, there's still a fair number of teams in front of them, but I suppose with the exception of Bournemouth currently, Wolves currently, maybe Fulham the last few weeks, none of those teams are playing particularly well, the teams in front of them. They do seem to have really stabilised and been, I'm not going to say they've been energised by the points deduction, but I think the crowd has been. And yeah, it's possible that they could finish well clear of the bottom three. I think if the 10-point deduction stands, I think top half might be pushing it a bit, because I can't see Chelsea failing to improve on the first half of the season. And looking at the table, it's there's quite a gap between 9th and 10th, so it might be that there's only one more spot in the top 10 available. But no, it's credit to Everton that, having had that sort of enormous blow and lost that next game against Manchester United, they've responded so well the last two games, and it's really encouraging.
Okay, Ollie, Joey, time has beaten us on this episode. Thanks very much for coming on. Ollie, thanks a lot.
Pleasure.
And Joey, thanks to you.
Thank you.
That is all for today. IO is going to be back on Monday. We will be back with another weekend preview next Friday. We will be back in the studio, I think, in the warmth of the studio. Oh yeah, and because we are building up to Christmas, why not give a friend or a loved one the gift of The Athletic this holiday season? A 1-year subscription at the special discounted price of just $19.99 in dollars or pounds for that entire year. If you want to take it up and you want to gift it to your loved ones, simply head to theathletic.com/footballpod. Thank you very much for listening and have a great weekend.
If you like this video, click subscribe for more content like this. We'll be joined by the likes of David Ornstein, Matt Slater, Adam Crafton, Carl Anker, and plenty more through the season to bring you the inside track to the biggest stories in football. If you'd like to listen to the full episodes for free, search the Athletic Football Podcast wherever you get your podcasts from.